Broadcasting from the Taz and Lake Lodge studio, this is Sporting Journal Radio. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Now here's your host, Bret Amundson.
All right, here I am, there I am. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in on the network, by demand, sportingjournalradio.com, or by subscribing to that podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We're going to do this too first before you came on, just like we did with mine to make it official. Dan Amundson joins us. Dan, how you doing?
Doing real well.
Got a really cool show today. Hank Shaw is going to be joining us. He's got this book that he put out earlier this year, Hook, Line, and Supper. I haven't had a chance to talk to him really yet about this book until now because it's been a busy year. And he actually just came through Minnesota on the book tour. We were out of town up at Lake of the Woods, so we didn't get to go visit him. When he was here, he's here in Minneapolis. He was up in Fargo. We were trying to get him to connect with my buddy Jason down in Hendricks at Bank Brewing, and schedules were just too busy, so we weren't able to make it there. But he's going to talk to us about what he's got in his book. He's got some really cool stuff, some interesting things. And even if you've been cleaning northern pike your entire life, you know how to get rid of those Y bones. He's got a little tip that I hadn't heard about yet. Maybe you've known about it, maybe not. But he's going to give us a little tip on cleaning northern pike. He's going to talk about what he does with trout that might be a little bit different than what you do, and a bunch of other, like even health when it comes to eating fish, what you should look out for and what you shouldn't. When you go buy fish at the store, what you should look for and what you shouldn't look, or what you should avoid. He'll explain all of that coming up later in the show. Randin Olson from Lockjaw Guide Service will join us too. He's been catching walleyes. You won't believe, I know it's been a common theme here on the show when we talk about where people are finding walleyes. You will not believe where he's been finding walleyes during this unbearable heat wave that we're dealing with right now across the region. And Joe Henry joins us from the airport. Where was he? Where's he going? We'll find out coming up in a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan, who is this week's show brought to us by?
Yeah, this week's show brought to you by Lake of the Woods Tourism. Plan a trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Time to start thinking about ice fishing up there, I guess. Ottertail Lakes Country. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort on Devil's Lake. Plan a trip to the legendary Devil's Lake at haybellheights.com. OnX Hunt, know where you stand with OnX, and Prairie Sportsman. Watch episodes anytime at prairiesportsman.org.
So we had to celebrate a little birthday earlier this week. Our little Tiny turned 1 year old on the 27th. I wasn't even paying attention to what the date was this week, Dan. It's been so busy. It's like, okay, it's just another day. And all of a sudden I saw Max Barta post, "Happy birthday, Ruby." I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Ruby and Tiny are the same age from the same litter. Oh, crap, Tiny, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. So for those of you that don't know who Tiny is, I'm going to play a little video for you to kind of show you who she is. And then also, for those of you that don't know about it, we have a new project coming from Sporting Journal Radio. Some of you have seen this before. Some of you have not. So we're going to give you a little sneak peek at what is coming involving our own little Tiny. You know from the beginning that they're not going to be with us forever. But that doesn't make it any easier.
The end of the world at the palm of my hand.
One of the best parts of hunting is watching the dog work.
When it all goes to hell, will you still be my friend?
One of the worst parts of hunting, come on, is watching that dog get old. I mean, this dog right here, she's been my life.
If you can't come with me, I'll understand. I'll understand.
So it's been tough to go out and get a new dog, but it's time.
Can we meet in the dark? We don't have to say much, and if you have to go, if we didn't know what we know.
While it isn't always easy, It's always worth it. This is a story about the highs and the lows of raising a gun dog. So there it is. Man, I struggle watching that still. Boy, when I made that thing, Dan, that was watching Mika, who's 10, get a little bit older. It's never anybody that's owned a hunting dog, gosh, you know that day is going to come when that dog is getting a little bit older, and some decisions have to be made. And man, it is never easy. So that is a new show that's going to be coming from Sporting Journal Radio. You can find it on you'll be able to find it on YouTube and social media. And right now you can find Raising Tiny on Instagram. Follow the Raising Tiny channel on Instagram. Now, Dan, we need something to pick us up after something that's a little bit sad like that. And you found a video. Let's see this video. You found this video. Now, what's going on in this video, Dan?
Yeah, it's just a guy. He's running wide open down the lake, and his day. You know, it might be funny for us, but it's not a very good day for him. Just watch and see what happens here.
He is ripping wide open. And you can just see the video just shows his motor. It's a close-up on the motor. Oh, there's part of the motor disappearing.
That's his lower unit.
Oh.
Gone.
Oh.
So, not a very good day for that man.
Show that one more time, Dan. Let's see that lower unit, because it comes flying right up out of the water.
Yeah, if you can't hear the audio, but you can hear the moment it leaves.
Oh, I bet it made it. There it goes.
There she goes.
Oofta. Wow. Do we know where that took place or anything like that?
I'm not sure. No, I just one of those things you see on the internet and makes you laugh. Made me laugh, but I can guarantee you whoever was driving that boat wasn't laughing.
That's right.
Pretty bad day.
Well, I've had some pretty interesting things taking place in my driveway when I've been working on my boat. You may have seen the video last week. You can see the short video on its own right now at the Sporting Journal Radio Facebook page. But I was out working on the boat in the driveway one day and heard a hummingbird buzzing around above me and found a hummingbird nest. Well, we've watched these two little chicks in this nest, this tiny little nest, grow bigger and older. And last video we showed you showed these tiny little birds. Not even, they didn't have their eyes open. They were, hiding down in the nest, things like that. Well, they're getting a little bit more bold now and they're showing themselves. So I'm going to play this little video for you right now of the hummingbirds in my driveway. So there's the two hummingbird chicks. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit because I work on the lighting a little bit there, make it a little bit brighter. So there they are. Their eyes are open. They're watching around. They're looking at me, side-eyeing me just a little bit, trying to figure out what the heck I am as I take their pictures, and their mom comes and goes and feeds them. But the hummingbird chicks are getting a little bit bigger, and I got a bunch of pictures and videos, and we'll share some more about those hummingbirds in the driveway as we get a little bit closer. And we might even be able to show some of these things in the newsletter, the SJR Insider newsletter that Dan handles. Dan, there's a new newsletter that went out this past week. What could people find in that?
Yeah, so if you are signed up, you're going to see a few different things. Hummingbird pictures are in there. I did a little photo dump from our trip to Lake of the Woods. Shocker, we went to Lake of the Woods. If you haven't heard us talk about that
it a lot.
Yeah. We dumped a few pictures there. The new hunting regs, they are out. I highlighted that a little bit. And a new aquatic invasive species found in Leech Lake, covering some of that not good stuff. But it's news that's out there. So if you're not signed up, you're not going to get that because it went out the other day. But be sure to get signed up so you get next week's newsletter. Who knows what's going to be in it? I don't know what's going to be in it yet. But go to sportingjournalradio.com, click on the SJR Insider tab, enter your email, and you'll get all signed up. And SJR Insider members do get 25% off their first purchase at the store, so you can get some sweet hats, hoodies, mugs, whatever, at a pretty good price.
Which is
sign up for that email.
A great benefit to do it, but here's why you're going to want to do it, because we're going to let you know if you live in Minnesota, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, Iowa, if you live in this Midwest region and even beyond a little bit, but if you're here and something big in the outdoor world takes place, some regulations change or whatever, we will send it right to your email inbox. So 2 new things happened in this past week that are in the newsletter or on our website, on our social media pages. And one was the waterfowl regs were finalized. Now, we kind of knew what was coming in those. We've been talking about the waterfowl changes quite a bit, but now they're finalized. We know for sure that early teal season and the early Canada goose season are going to be September 4, that Saturday, which is pretty typical, but now we know for sure. We know our start and end dates on those seasons. We know our limits. And one question, now we'd known about it. Like we'd been told about motorized decoys, like right from the source. We got the word from them, but nobody could really find it printed anywhere. We were the only people telling you that it was going to be legal the entire season to run mojos or spinning wing decoys, motorized decoys. Well, they finally put it in their regs book. They were waiting for it to be printed in the regs book, and that's come out now. So you can see the full list of official regs at sportingjournalradio.com, or get it in that newsletter, where motorized decoys are for sure going to be allowed the entire season, which I'm totally cool with. I know some people have their reservations. We don't always use them when we hunt water anyway, but we have in the past, and of course they can be very effective, but you don't always need them when you're on water, especially hunting teal. I mean, you can use them during the early teal season, but realistically, you could stand up and wave your arm up and down and probably decoy teal. So, and the other thing that came out, other hunting regs came out, but some of the other big changes involved whitetail deer hunting in Minnesota, including a change in some of the zones that probably won't affect too many people, but I thought it was pretty interesting why they changed it. So they had some zones where I think, Dan, you could get unlimited tags to kill deer. Probably in the Twin Cities, they had some unlimited zones because there's a lot of car deer accidents and some different interactions because they're overpopulated, and there aren't enough people killing deer in those areas because you're in the city. So they increase the amount of tags and basically make it unlimited. Well, some people thought there's going to be this giant bloodthirsty slaughter of these poor defenseless white-tailed deers and Bambis. So the DNR literally changed it from unlimited to a maximum of 5 deer that you can get in those units. And that they'll straight up tell you it's not going to change the amount of deer that are going to get killed by hunters. It's literally all optics. It's just to appease people that think that hunters are going to go on a rampage and kill everything that moves. So it's not going to result in a change in number of deer being killed, they think. I'm sure there are some people that are upset that probably would shoot more than 5 deer, but that they say the average is 2 for most hunters. Your average is 2. So it's not going to affect much. But because people thought that it was just going to be a mass slaughter, they had to change it. So you can see the whitetail regs at sportingjournalradio.com, or of course you'll get updated in our newsletter, the SJR Insider. Sign up for that. A friend of ours, I was up at Corey Loeffler's last week, Dan. I got a bone to pick with you, Corey. I was up there, and he was screen printing all these new shirts. So I got a new DRC shirt on that I'm wearing. So he got all this new stuff that you'll be able to get at Game Fair this year. And he's got some really cool new designs. And he bought a screen printer. So he literally was running a sweatshop last week. And that's only because it was 150 degrees and we were sweating inside his shop. But we were making T-shirts and hoodies and things. Well, they were. I was drinking beer and watching them, let's be honest. But I was there with him, hung out for a day, and didn't know about this that Dan is about to show you right here, right now. So we're not going to get the audio from this video, but he has got a brand new call. I'm assuming it says, I'm chomping at the bit to get out in the field again. Unfortunately, this new call won't help the waterfowl. This new call drop won't help the waterfowl blues. It'll help you get kicked out of the house by opening day. So I'm assuming August 1st. Yeah. So, by the time you're watching this, we may know about it already, but leading up to this, we don't know. Like, I was there at his house, Dan, and didn't let me in on the secret that he's got this new call drop, and so that's very cool from Corey. Check it out, DRC Calls. Coming up later in the show, Randin Olson is going to talk about where he's finding walleyes. You might be surprised. 90 degrees, midday, high sun. Where's he finding those walleyes? He'll tell you coming up. And then Joe Henry's going to join us from the airport. But first, it's time to talk wild game cooking and fish preparation with Hank Shaw.
On X Hunt. Ever heard of it? Next time you see that guy at your local shop who always punches his tag on a stud whitetail, ask him. He'll tell you about the most trusted source for mapping, with nationwide landowner names, private and public land boundaries, including walk-in areas, map tools to mark spots, and the ability to view your maps without cell service. And that's just scratching the surface. It's your time to be known as the big buck guy around town. Download the leader in hunt mapping on Google Play or the App Store. On X Hunt. Know where you stand.
This week we got a really cool guest to join us because one of the things that is trending in the outdoor world and has been for the last couple of years, I think, is eating of that wild game. People like to know where their food is coming from. People like to go out and hunt for it themselves or catch it for themselves, but they don't always know how to prepare it. So Hank Shaw is our guest now. He's got a new book, Hook, Line, and Supper, that is available now. We'll get it on camera there. There we go. And Hank joins us here on the show. Hank Shaw, how you doing?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Very good. Thanks for giving us some time today. I appreciate that. I know it's been a busy summer for you. Been touring around the country with the release of this new book. How has that book tour been going for you? It's
been going okay. I mean, in this sort of weird 2021, which is only slightly less weird than 2020.
Yeah.
And then now with Delta, things are just, I mean, that's a huge monkey wrench and everything. I was all full speed ahead and this is going to be great and the fall's going to be awesome. And then Delta. So who knows? There's a lot of question marks at this point, but so far so good. Minnesota's been really fun. I just got back from there and had a couple of really, really good events and then another good event in Fargo as well.
Where were you you were in Minneapolis?
I was at Fulton Brewing.
Yeah, I like how you go to the breweries. That's like a perfect fit.
Well, yeah, like I do like the fancier dinners once in a while, but because it really gets a chance to showcase some of the possibilities that you can do with each of the cookbooks. But sometimes those are expensive, and I want everybody to be able to come to an event and chew the fat and drink a beer and get a book signed and something that's not super high cost.
And I came and met you at one of the stops a couple years ago. Now I think it was 2019 maybe. And,
it was Pheasant Fest, was it not?
I think it was right around there, but it was a little South Dakota brewery.
Right. Yeah. You and Ashley Peters saved me because it was a tiny event. I'm like, there's nobody here. And then you showed up and Ashley showed up and we had a good time. It made the night. And
they served a dish inspired by one of your recipes, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was rabbit, if I remember. It was like a rabbit pasta, rabbit.
Yeah, it was just like a rabbit ragu. So it was real easy. They took a bunch of cottontails and ground them up and made a spaghetti sauce out of them, and it was really good.
It was really good.
I mean, that was my recipe? So.
Of course. Did you do that this time around? Did they pair a meal with?
They did. So at Fulton, they did walleye rillettes. So they smoked a bunch of walleyes and then kind of pounded them in with cream cheese and some horseradish and some other things for the recipe. And the cookbook is for salmon, but as they proved, you can use all kinds of different other fish than salmon, which is kind of the point of the book. So I'm glad they did that.
Well, we're going to talk about the book, of course, because it is more than a book full of recipes. It is, I think April Volke called it a handbook in the book there, and I think that's a fair description of it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's just set this up because this is a fishing handbook. I was going to call it a cookbook. Right. This is a fishing book. You're known more for hunting probably, but you grew up fishing more than hunting, right?
Right, exactly. I've been fishing and gathering shellfish and such. Well, probably as long as I can remember, and before that, I mean, there's pictures of me as a toddler digging clams, where I'm 2 or 3. So, yeah, it's been a whole lifetime, which which is it's nice to actually have a book out that is involved in a subject that I know so much about.
You spent a lot of time when you were growing up doing that fishing, because you were on the East Coast, right? And then you were on boats with people from all over the world.
Oh yeah, and party boats. So unless you live around the Great Lakes, really you don't have party boats in the center of the country because you need big water and lots of people. So there are some around Chicago and Milwaukee, but basically it's a boat that everybody gets on, but it's like riding a bus where everyone's going in there to fish. And so anybody and everybody shows up. And if you're friendly and willing to talk to your neighbor, you will learn all kinds of things from people that you might not actually encounter in any other way.
I was going to say we have party boats here in Minnesota, but it's something completely different. I think there was one.
Oh, yeah, the Tonka.
The Tonka boat.
boats.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. So you learned a lot from all those people, and you got fairly confident in your abilities, and you actually placed a bet with a bartender?
Yes. To be in your early 20s or mid 20s, I guess I was for this one. So, I used to hang out at an Irish bar called Kavanaugh's in Bayport, Long Island. And this has got to be 96, maybe 95 even. So yeah, it's like totally mid 20s. And so I came in at the bar and I'm like, hey man, I bet you every single time I go out fishing this year, I'm going to come home with something. And I'm talking all kinds of smack. And the bartender's like, all right, put your money where your mouth is. So he said, all right, so you have to come in the bar immediately after fishing every single time you go. Now, it's not like I had to go every single day, but because I actually had a job. But I lived in, it's called Bayport, so you're right on the water. And so I fished probably 4 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week for, months. So he said, all right, so it was like Marchish. And he's like, all right, if you succeed in doing this and you come back and you got to bring us and show us your catch and you got to show us that you're going to eat it till Thanksgiving, you can drink beer for a month for free. But if you fail, you've got to pay the bar tab for the whole bar for a night. And, again, I'm in my mid 20s. It's not like I make a lot of money. So it's like the prospect of financial ruin will sharpen the mind. But what that taught me is to be flexible. It taught me to really, really pay attention. Because so many people think that fishing is just, a rod and a reel. And then the next level is a rod and a reel. And, well, what bait or what lure do you use? Well, it's way more than that. It's where do you go? What time do you go? What are the tides? What are the moon phases? What's the season? What are your best opportunities to succeed on any given day? And that really makes you a fisherman as opposed to just a person with a rod and a reel in their hand.
Did you have to eat your bait one time?
I did indeed. I did indeed. I was using white bait, so like these really tiny little minnows, and because I was actually trying to catch pufferfish, because we have an Atlantic pufferfish that, unlike the Japanese one, which can kill you, this one is absolutely delicious. You eat the tails, and so it's almost like a chicken wing, where it's like one bone, and then you can eat it. And they're fantastic. And I was catching them all week, but I was using these little shiners and no pufferfish. So I'm like, all right, we're going to flour them and fry them and have fries with eyes.
Well, I was going to ask you about pufferfish next, actually. That was literally the next question on my list here.
Really? Are you serious?
Yeah, because you think about that, and immediately you think of, man, if you don't cook it right, you're going to be in trouble. But this is a completely different pufferfish.
Well, I mean, they do have the poisonous liver. So the one in the Pacific, their liver is so toxic that if you get even like a smidge, you could, in theory, die. And like 1 or 2 people in Japan die every year from it. But in the U.S., this fish lives from about Connecticut down to like Georgia, pretty much. And I'll put it this way. I caught 27 of them one day. And after eating about a dozen, my lips got numb. And so I'm like, time to stop eating them for today.
Oh, boy. Wow. You spent some time fishing and eating eels?
Oh, I love eels. I love eels. I mean, we're talking American eels.
All right.
they're fantastic. I mean, so if you've ever been to a sushi place, you've eaten unagi, right?
Sure.
It's the barbecued eel. It's rich, white, fatty, just firm. Like it's like the Goldilocks fish. It's crazy. But when you catch them, there's two things that you need to know. Number one, do not ever, 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 ever net them unless you want to buy a new net, because what they do is they're slimy, and B, they get kind of like, they go like in the net, and then they completely like destroy the net with slime, and then they get tied up in it, and so you have to cut them out of the net. It's just not a good idea. Ask me how I know. And two,
You've gone through a few nets.
just one.
Just one.
Just
That's all
one.
it
I'm like,
takes.
yep. Yeah, no. That's $30 down the drain. And this is in like 1996. So like, yeah, no.
And you were saving up to have to pay for an entire bar's worth of drinks at this point. So.
Well, this is a different year, but yeah, I was a newspaper reporter, and we didn't make any money. So the other one is they don't die, kind of ever. And so this is a trick I learned from an old timer, old black guy he taught me a lot about catching eels because he loved them too. And we were fishing on the Rappahannock River in Virginia. And so he's like, what you got to do is you got to go to the supermarket and buy a 5-pound thing of salt, like a thing of Morton's kosher salt, and put that in the bottom of a bucket. And when you catch an eel, throw him in the bucket, and then he'll squirm around, and then he'll cover himself with salt, and he'll die. And it takes all the slime off. So like you can get through a limit of eels on a 5-pound, or I think it's a 5-pound box of salt. And then they come out of the salt, and they're salted, and B, they're not slimy.
So is that what?
Yep, this guy.
What method is? What is that salt doing? Is it drying it out, or how is the salt killing it? Or is it just because it's out of water, or what's?
No, it's definitely not because it's out of water. Because those eels can live for months. That's an exaggeration, but the eels can live for like a day out of water if they're kept moist. So what I think the salt does is it strips their slime layer off, and it gives them an overdose of salt. Now they're anadromous, or catadromous is actually really what they are, because they spend their lives in freshwater and then go to saltwater to breed, unlike salmon, which do the opposite. And so they can handle salt at some point in their life, but not that much. It would be like, kind of ODing on tequila.
So this book, let's talk about the book, Hook, Line, and Supper. Obviously, you've got recipes in here. People are going to learn how to cook different dishes and things like that. But there's so much about techniques and processing. Cooking fish or wild game for a lot of people can be intimidating, and that's probably why a lot of people don't do it. More and more people are starting to do it now. But this book essentially is not only to give you some recipe ideas and inspire some dishes, but just to teach you what to do with these fish from start to finish, right?
Yeah, so this book takes over as soon as it comes over the rail.
Sure.
Much like buck moose, as soon as the deer's down, that's when I come in. And so I start, I've worked commercially on boats. I've worked as a deckhand on charter boats. And so I know I saw those behind you. and so basically, yay. So basically, I've kind of seen it all in terms of how people handle fish on the deck, and a good meal starts as soon as the fish comes over the rail. And there are a few easy tricks that people just need to do and remember, and you're going to have a better quality fish. Number one is bleed your fish, which it's hilarious because, I was taught to bleed fish by old timers in the 70s when I was a little boy, because it was a thing then, and somehow it got out of favor, and people look at me crosswise. Like I was fishing for salmon and trout of all things in Lake Michigan, in Wisconsin. And we were the charter captain. This charter captain was giving us massive stink eye for wanting to bleed salmon and trout. And like, are you high? Like, of course you bleed them because they're the bloodiest fish there is. And the problem with this is, so you bleed fish for a number of reasons. Number one is aesthetics. So when you bleed a fish out, when you fillet it, your cutting board's not covered in blood. But there's a better reason to do it. The fish stays firmer. The fish is a cleaner tasting fish. It's less fishy tasting, and the fish will keep more in the fridge. So in other words, a bled trout will keep I'm just going to make up a number, 5 days in the fridge, and a non-bled trout will start to smell after 3 days. So you have extended shelf life if you bleed and then get it on ice. And then with nervous fish, and I call nervous fish the fish that live fast and die hard. So trout are definitely one of those for freshwater. If it is really helpful if it's possible. Like if you're on a boat, this is possible. So catch your trout, bleed your trout, and it's as easy as getting a 5-gallon bucket full of water and then pop both gills and put them head first in the water and he'll bleed out. Take that trout in a lull in between catching other trout and gut that fish. Gut that fish on the boat and either use the guts to catch more fish or toss them overboard and then get that fish on ice. You will notice a shocking difference in quality.
Well, then Dan, who's with us, has been bleeding his fish. He bled our walleyes that we were catching last week on our trip. But one thing in your book I hadn't heard of before is pressure bleeding.
Yes.
Explain what that is.
Pressure bleeding is an Alaskan trick. So I just learned it fairly recently when I was working as a deckhand in Alaska on a salmon boat. So I actually have a YouTube video of me pressure bleeding that we can link to if you'd like. And I kind of totally walk through the process. But the short version is when you have a fish, and this is kind of any fish, what we do in the commercial market is we head and gut the fish on the boat. So you remove the head, you gut the fish, you scrape that kidney, that bloody sort of brown line along the spine. And then we have attached to our hose system a heavy gauge needle, like a kind of a marinade injector needle kind of thing. And you set it to run through your water hose, kind of like an old man peeing, right? So like not, cow pissing on a rock, but just kind of like, that kind of thing. And what that is enough to do is you jam that needle into the main artery of the fish, which is, there you go, which is right underneath, it is right underneath the head. So you'll see it. It's pretty obvious. And then you jam that in there. And if you think you've bled your fish, you do that, and oh my God, so much blood comes out that you never even know was there. And the difference in quality for that is profound. So anybody who's ever caught salmon or trout will know that there's a kind of a salmon smell or a salmon stink that you get when you cook this stuff, especially after freezing it. A pressure bled fish does not have that. Look at all that blood coming out. And that fish has been bled.
Wow. Yeah, you wouldn't expect that much more blood to still be in there.
Yeah, and what that does is it improves shelf life. It also improves the firmness of the fish, and it also will keep you it won't smell. Like it just will not. I've had year-old vacuum sealed salmon that has been pressure bled that has no smell.
You had a couple of other things when you talk about bleeding fish. You have another tool that you like to use, and it's called wood shampoo. Explain to people what wood shampoo is.
So like, if you've ever been to like Bat Day at Twin Stadium, where it's like a bat like about like this big, like maybe 2 foot long. It's like a little replica bat. Every angler for 100 miles is going to go to the stadium on that day because this is the greatest thing in the world to take the starch out of the shorts of an angry fish.
I've got a couple of those bats from old Twins games back in the day.
Mm-hmm. The English call it a priest.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that's medieval because I think in medieval times that priests and clerics were not allowed to use bladed weapons. So they had a mace to bash your head in instead.
Wow. Man. Well, all stuff that we've learned in hook, line, and supper, again, in the book. And there's a lot more, obviously, as we've said, a lot more than fish recipes in there. A lot about the processing, but also just a lot about fish in general and learning about different types of fish, the benefits, what you should look out for. And I know, Hank, when I'm fishing, I'm generally happy, but there might be some science behind that.
The science of being happy while fishing. I mean, I think it's just every animal, and this has been proven in zoo animals even, is happier when you work for your own food. There's an experiment that they did with like lions and tigers, where when they threw the meat to the lions and tigers, they were like meh, but if they made them solve problems, they were much happier. And so it's the equivalent to that in the fishing world is that trout that you caught when you were in the backcountry or in the boundary waters that you ate that day for dinner is the best trout you've ever had. Because it's the experience, it's the working for it, it's all of that. And there's got to be some sort of hormone or dopamine or whatever that we get from the meal after a successful either hunt or fishing trip.
Well, and even you've talking about amino acids and omega-3s and brain food and some other big words that I'm not going to be able to pronounce correctly in there. So there is some science about the health benefits and just the mental benefits, of course, about it. And then when it comes to like the fishing industry, you touch on who to trust in the fishing industry when it comes to, say, sustainable practices and healthy fish. And I want to use what you described in there as an excuse that I'm just gonna have to move to Alaska because of this.
Well, you could do worse. The Alaska Constitution requires that every fishery be sustainable. So an enormous amount of that state's resources are spent keeping that promise. So, for example, when we fish salmon in Alaska, our openers are typically 3 days. So it's, we'll open it on like noon on a Sunday, and then it's open all day Monday, and usually all day Tuesday, and then it closes at noon on Wednesday. Now they can shorten that or lengthen it, and it's all dependent on scientists watching how many salmon come up river. And if X amount of salmon come up the river, then they're like, okay, cool, you guys can fish. And if lots of salmon fish, come up the river, they're like, oh, you get an extra day. And if not enough come up, you're like, oh, we have to cut it a day short. So it's a constantly moving thing, and it's a very supple, very advanced way of managing fisheries that really no other state does. And it's kind of amazing. So how does that matter from a consumer's perspective? From a consumer's perspective, if you buy American or if you catch it yourself, you're pretty much okay. Now there are people who could, make exceptions to that, and sure there you could, but it's in general, American fisheries are more heavily regulated than those of other countries. So in general, if you want to feel good about that fish that you buy, make sure it's from the United States or you catch it yourself.
It's pretty interesting too how they track and monitor those river runs for those fish with different sonar techniques and people out there just counting.
They have bridges sometimes where it's like a guy's like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Man, be quite a job. But it's also interesting and on how it's worked, because this is a completely different example or a completely different situation to use as an example. But here on Mille Lacs now, they've been closing the season in the hottest part of the summer because of hook mortality, and as they're watching that population of fish, and everybody freaks out about it, of course, because it's a huge traditional walleye factory and it's close to the Twin Cities, so it gets fished by a lot of people. So they don't like it when they close that down. But having that approach of opening and closing, and sure, it gets confusing. But maybe that's going to become more the norm in more areas based on what they've done in Alaska up there.
I think you're right. I think they do that with trout here in the West too. When we have really nasty heat waves, there's notices everywhere like, don't fish for trout, or if you fish for trout for like an hour at dawn, because once the temperature gets up, you get a really vicious hook mortality, like over 50%. And it, in the case where it might look like a perfect release, but if it's 80 degrees out, that fish is going to die.
Just throw one more picture up there. Hank, you're not a fan of tilapia.
I am sort of a fan of tilapia. So I'm a fan of tilapia when you catch them in the Gulf of Mexico or Florida, where they've gone feral, because that's a tilapia living its best life. Tilapia in the store is the Soylent Green of fish. It's people. You have to be a certain age to get that joke.
Right. In the book, you list some of the health concerns when it comes to eating fish, and list some of the fish to avoid for different reasons, like high mercury contents. And this one kind of stuck out to me because so my mom she's not really a fish eater. She's not a wild game eater. If we shoot a deer, she doesn't eat the venison. If we caught walleye, it was the guys having a fish fry out in the garage or at the cabin or whatever. But once in a while, she'd go to the store and she'd come home with orange roughy. And I remember eating that every so often as a kid. So, and now it's been many years since I've had it, but you're saying you haven't seen it in a store for quite a while?
For like forever. Like for whatever reason, either fishery collapsed or Americans' taste changed or whatever. But yeah, I have not seen orange roughy in ages.
I obviously haven't been paying attention, but I was curious what the cause of that might be. But it's interesting.
Well, it's like Chilean sea bass. Like there was a run on them, and so in the 90s, I think it was, where like everybody was serving Chilean sea bass on the menu, and they really, really overfished them, and they're big, slow-growing fish. So now there's only one sustainable fishery for them left, and it's the Falkland Islands. So if you see Chilean sea bass, it's actually with a United Kingdom marker, so it's from the United Kingdom. That one's a sustainable fishery. And funny story, the way they keep it sustainable is the Royal Navy patrols that fishery. And if pirates, pirate anglers or pirate commercial fishermen go in there and try and catch them, they will put a shot across their bow.
Really?
It's like that's no joke.
I love a good pirate story. I didn't expect one today. That's great. But when it comes to that, like buying fish at the store, you also list a bunch of tips that kind of break down what to look for when you buy fish at the store in the book.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for most people listening to this would be, unless you have access to a really good fish market, like you'll know. It'd be that fish market everybody talks about. Unless you have one of those in your community, just go right to the freezer section. Just skip the so-called fresh fish aisle altogether, because virtually all of that fish is going to be thawed already. So you'll see a little teeny sign that says previously frozen, and it means that they bought it fresh, or they bought it frozen. They thawed it in their cooler, and you don't know how many days it's been there. And you will get better quality fish and seafood if you buy it frozen, because it's been properly frozen by the manufacturer. So it's either FAS, which is frozen at sea, or it's blast frozen at a processing plant on shore. So why does that matter? Blast freezing at 40 below zero or colder. When something freezes, as you well know, that ice is bigger than water. So when something freezes, it expands, and the faster that you freeze something, the smaller those ice crystals form within the thing, in this case, a piece of fish. So if you have a piece of fish that is blast frozen at 40 below or colder, the ice crystals that form are very, very small, and you're going to have very minimal moisture loss when you thaw it out. So that blood when you thaw a piece of venison, or that liquid when you thaw a piece of walleye, that's cell wall fluid. Yeah, there you go. That's cell wall fluid that is inevitable when you're thawing, but it is way worse than if you froze something in your kitchen freezer versus a piece of blast frozen seafood. And so it even actually works in the sense that it's been blast frozen in Texas or Alaska or wherever, but it's at your regular freezer temperature, it's still fine because its initial freezing process was very, very cold.
Most of this audience is probably in the Midwest, and our idea of fresh fish at the store is probably a little bit different than fresh fish on the coast, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there are really good commercial fisheries for freshwater fish in Minnesota, or available to Minnesotans is probably a better way to put it. You get Canadian walleye, you get
Sure.
yellow perch, you get things from the Great Lakes. there are commercial freshwater fisheries, and so you have the opportunity to get really high quality freshwater fish, at a market. Whereas that's not possible where I live, but I can get really good saltwater fish.
When it comes to actually doing your own fish, though, going out and catching it, bringing it home, cutting it up, we've talked about what to do, bleeding the fish, what to do right away. But now that you got them home, what tools do you recommend people having in their arsenal at home?
I think number one, it would be a fish spatula. So it's a bendy, very light, very thin spatula that's handed. So I'm left-handed. So because the world hates me, I had to specially order one.
A left-handed fish spatula. So now we've talked about pirates and priests and wood shampoo, and now left-handed spatulas on the show today.
Yep. And so a fish spatula has a little blade on the end of it, and it's not a very sharp blade, but it's sharp enough. And you want that flexibility and that thinness and that a little bit of cutting power, so that if a piece of fish if a piece of fish wants to stick on your grill or your pan, that's the tool to get it off. Whereas if you have a thicker spatula, it's just not going to work. So that would be number one. Yep, that would be the right-hander's version. And another really important thing would be things that you know what I've started to use over the last 4 or 5 years that really helps if you're searing a piece of fish is a bacon press. So if you have a piece of fish, right, and you're searing it, if its skin is on, it's going to want to arc. And so a bacon press flattens it out. Interesting. And so by doing that, you have perfect connection you can do this with a duck breast too, by the way. It prevents it from arcing up. And so you get a flat piece and a better sear.
That happens.
And so I use that all the time. You can use a little pan if you wanted to, but a bacon press works perfect.
Interesting. You also talk about using a spoon. So I've heard of a couple of different methods of cleaning a northern pike, and you actually talk about a couple of the popular methods in the book too. But you then brought up a spoon, which I'd never heard of using a spoon when you're cleaning pike.
Oh, the spoon meat. Yeah. Okay. So I originally learned about this with salmon, because the cool thing about a salmon is that virtually all of it's edible. Like, you can do something with everything. I mean, people even eat the livers. I find the livers to be heavily parasitized, so I don't really mess with them. But other than the guts and gills, there's a use for pretty much everything. So after you've filleted any fish, unless you're Jedi Master, and I'm pretty good, but I'm not a Jedi Master, there's going to be some meat left on that carcass. So you take a spoon and you just scrape back from the head, or where the head was, back towards the tail, and you will pull off an enormous amount of meat that is perfect for like fish cakes, fritters, meatballs. Like if for some reason you want to make a fish, like a ground fish preparation, I've got a recipe for fish sausage in the book. But the spoon meat is my number one thing to use for fish cakes. And so pike cakes made with that spoon meat, especially if you get a big one. Like, I was fishing in Canada a couple of years ago, and I caught a 41 incher, and that's a lot of pike. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to waste any of the meat.
You got to explain fish sausage now. I don't think we can go any further without you talking about what your fish sausage is like.
So fish sausage, it took me a lot of iterations to get one where I actually wanted to eat it. And it's kind of not unlike what they do in the UP, where you want, at the very least, 50% of your fish to be made with a fatty fish, which in your neck of the woods is lake trout or other trout, because your only fatty fish that you have with any consistency, because sheep's head do get fat sometimes, but they could be also lean. They kind of go through cycles. But the salmonids, so the lake trout, whitefish, and other kinds of trout, they're always going to be fatty. So that's kind of what you want to make your fish sausage out of. But even then, it needs some more fat. And I've seen people use oil. I like to use cream, heavy cream, full heavy cream. Like, don't mess around. Full heavy cream, because it's the fat you want. And then you basically just grind it. You know, make it just like any other sausage. And instead of ice water, you put really cold heavy cream, and then that's your bind, and that's your mixture. And then my advice, if you're going to do that, is to stuff it into sheep casings. So the really narrow ones that don't have a lot of bite to them. You could use narrow pork casings too. So like you can buy pork casings from places like the Sausage Maker, and you can buy, you know, they come in different widths. So you're going to want the most narrow because they're going to be the most tender in terms of a casing, because you want to case your sausage exactly like you do any other sausage. And then, in my opinion, fish sausages are best smoked.
Okay.
So you then smoke it, and then you can just eat it as is, or you can reheat it, and then it's pretty good.
Is it become like like something that you would eat as a snack, or like a brat, or you'd be putting it on your plate and cutting into her? Okay.
Either way, I mean, I've eaten them cool out of the refrigerator with mustard while watching the Packers. Go Packers! You're probably a Vikings fan.
We're gonna have to end this interview now. Nah, it's all right. Sure. Well, that's interesting. What not to give away your whole recipe on here, but what kind of seasonings what kind of taste will you try to get out of that?
Because I come at it from a northern tradition, so like a Great Lakes kind of tradition. I use things like mustard seed and marjoram and horseradish. I don't make it like, it's not like a chorizo. Like, that's not to say that you couldn't do a chorizo, but that would be a different kind of fish sausage. And I probably would do that with something like a king mackerel, you know, so like a tropical fish. But up there with lake trout and whitefish, I would definitely kind of think brat.
Sure. Well, that sounds good. You know, that's the beauty, I think, when you look through a book like this, when you read a book like this, it just opens up your brain to new possibilities, especially if you've cooked walleye a million times. It just gives you some new ideas, you know, some new things to try and new ways to do things. And in fact, I was reading about, we were talking about trout. I was reading about how you fillet a trout or process, say, a rainbow trout. And a lot of times too, I will cut them open and I'll just kind of gut them basically. And then usually what I end up doing is putting some butter and some seasoning inside that cavity that I've created, and I'll cook it right on the grill. A lot of times I'll cut the head off or something when I do that, but just leave the rest of it kind of all intact. And then after I cook it, sometimes I'll grab that backbone and pull the ribs out and pull it out after it's been cooked. But you actually talk about doing that before you cook it, and you cut that dorsal fin off. And then the best part about it, though, is you sew it afterwards. You stuff it and sew it.
You can. I mean, stuffing and sewing is a little bit, I mean, I'll do that for like Thanksgiving. Like, so there's a traditional striped bass Thanksgiving dinner for coastal New England where they don't use a turkey, they use a striped bass. So they do that. I will admit that I do not always sew it. But what I do often is you'll either kite it. So to kite a fish is to not gut it and fillet down around the ribs, and so that the belly is in one piece, and you, of course, remove the guts. So that's kiting. And then butterflying is the opposite. So butterflying is you gut the fish and then you remove the bones so that the back of the fish is intact. So it's two avenues to the same street, basically. And there you go. So kiting would be the opposite. So you see the collars, and that is so all those bones are out. And it, you know, to kite, I kite like codfish when I'm doing salted cod. And I've kited lake trout when I'm going to smoke a whole lake trout. But this process really is cool with like littler trout, is in that you can serve it as like a big flat thing. And there's a Mexican dish called pescado zarandeado. And that's where they flatten the fish just like that. And then they put it in a fish basket on the grill, and one side has green salsa and one side has red salsa on it. It's super cool. It's a really neat dish.
Well, and obviously this stuff is in the book. You have a lot on your website as well. Tell people where we can find you online and on social media.
So I'm probably most active on social media on Instagram. So I'm at Hunt Gather Cook on Instagram, and I like that venue because it still seems like the way social media used to be, which is to say, let's have some fun, show some cool pictures, and like not hate each other. And
Yeah, for sure.
so for the most part, Instagram has been fun. And that's Hunt Gather Cook. And then on Facebook, I run a private group called Hunt Gather Cook. And it's got almost 24,000 members in it, and it's private. So you have to answer questions to get in. Just tell me that you heard me on this podcast or this radio show, and I'll let you in. But the thing is, the reason we do that is because I try to keep, I mean, riffraff's not a good word, but there are some people who are just not there for the right reasons. I mean, that we have everything from like hippie Earth mothers who are vegetarians on there to like dually driving MAGA people, and everybody gets along because there's no politics involved in policy. Like keep it. It's all about being better at wild food. So the whole point is for everyone to, hey, I got a question about this and I want to be better at doing this, whatever this is, as long as it's a wild food topic, it's valid. And it's been good. It's been really good. Like I only have to swing the band hammer like once a month, which is pretty good for 24,000.
It is pretty good. And especially in today's climate, I mean,
right?
People have to just get politics out of their brain for so many. You can only think about it for so much, and it seems like it creeps into every aspect of people's lives, especially on social media, because people feel as though there's no repercussions for what they say on there. So it's nice when people from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of political affiliations, ideologies, and whatever, and can just talk about food or hunting and fishing and getting outside.
We're all there for I'm here for the food.
That's right. All right, Hank. And where can people get the book?
You can buy the book literally wherever fine books are sold. So my best advice would be, if you need it now, like ASAP, I would actually go to Amazon, because I cannot match their shipping. They're really, Amazon's more of a shipping company than anything else.
Sure.
However, you help me out a little bit more if you buy it direct from me. So there's the link there. It's going to take you 4 to 5, maybe 6 days to get it, because I have to sell it. I have to ship it media mail. But if you're willing to wait a couple of days, buy from me, or buy from your local bookstore. They can get it too. Or then if you need it ASAP, go to Amazon, either way. So there's lots of different ways to get it depending on what your needs are.
And I got to reorder Pheasant, Quail, Cottontail, I think. Either that or I put it in a different bookcase, because I've got it and I've used it a lot, but I think I let...
You mean the one that you just picked up about 10 minutes ago?
No, I've got... Oh, yeah. No, what's the other one? I'm missing
Duck,
one
Duck,
of them.
Goose.
Duck,
You're
Duck,
missing
Goose.
Duck, Duck, Goose.
And I can't remember if I let it... I may have let an ex-girlfriend borrow it.
I'm pretty sure you did.
And I don't think I ever got it back. So that's the one...
So that one you should get on Amazon or from your local bookstore, because I don't sell that one directly on my site.
Okay.
So the Duck and Goose cookbook is probably, I would say your best bet is Amazon in that case.
Sure. And I use Amazon plenty, and I've got no qualms about using Amazon, but I'll tell you what, I'm always a proponent of buying local, and especially somebody like you, that this is your product. You put the work. I'd like you to get the benefits out of it. So I encourage
Definitely
people.
helps me out a little bit more.
I encourage people to buy it from your site. Hank, great stuff. Keep up the good work out there. Thanks for coming on the show today, and hopefully the rest. If you've got more, do you have more of the book tour coming up?
I hope so. I sure hope so. Yeah, like I want to go to Alaska. I want to go to the upper Midwest, New England, the deep South again. Like I got a lot of places that I want to go, and let's cross your fingers that that the world conditions are gonna let me do my thing.
Yeah. Do you have dates, or is everything kind of on hold again for you? Oh, you do. Okay.
Yeah. everything you just showed the book tour page on Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook.
Sorry.
And
I cut it off short.
That page shows you what's absolutely nailed down. Now, who knows, pandemic crap willing. But this is what I'm planning on doing. And then beyond September and October, I am planning to be in the South, and a little bit more in the Northeast in October, November. So I'm doing my best, and hopefully we can make it happen.
Yeah. Well, good luck with everything. People
Thanks.
can find everything that you got going on your website there, and of course on social media. Hank Shaw, thanks for the time today on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today. We had a pretty good fishing trip recently despite these hot temperatures, and that's what we're going to talk about right now is fishing in the heat with Randin Olson from Lockjaw Guide Service. Randin, how you doing, man?
Hey, guys.
Welcome to the show. You've been on walleyes mostly lately, is that right?
Yeah, mostly been walleye trips, few panfish trips mixed in, but a lot of the old gravel lizards.
And what's interesting that we were talking about this a little bit off the air is where you're finding these fish, because it's been a constant theme of our show here this year recently about where to find walleyes when it's this hot. Now, traditionally, you think about you got to go a little bit later. You got to go a little bit deeper out there, find fish in in deeper water when it gets real hot like that. But that. And you might still find some out there, of course, but that's not where you've been finding them lately. Is that right?
No, we've really been focusing on shallow sand. The weeds are holding some fish, deep water's holding some fish, but we've been finding really big schools sitting way up tight in like 2 to 4 foot of water.
I'm sorry, I thought you said 2 to 4 feet of water.
2 to 4 foot of water, yes, sir.
Wow, really?
And the crazier part is that these fish have been biting better the calmer and the closer you are to noon. So the less wind you have and the brighter the sun is, the better this bite's gotten.
Now you're just telling fish stories now, Randin. You're saying that on these hot summer sunny days, the brighter the sun, the calmer the wind, you're finding these fish shallow.
Yep.
I want some of what he's having right now. What do you? Okay, let's talk about water clarity. Is this a clear lake? Is this dark colored water? What are you fishing in?
So most of this has been on like Ottertail Lake. It's a big giant lake. It's pretty clear. We've had zebra mussels for about 8-9 years now, something like that. But we get an algae bloom every year when that water tops off, like 77, 78. We get a pretty nice algae bloom, and it just dirties it up enough where you can get away doing this stuff.
That's
our clarity right now is about 3 foot, so you can watch these fish. That's one of the fun things is we can pick them out with our eyeballs before we start casting and catching them.
Really? So you're sight fishing walleyes in 2 to 3 feet of water?
Not all the time, but yeah, we're sight fishing some walleyes up there.
Okay, so you're probably using a little bit of stealth moving into that shallow water, I'm assuming, kind of moving in with the troller, and then you're casting up along this is up along the shoreline?
Well, not on Ottertail. Ottertail's got 2 feet of water way out in the middle of the lake, so a lot of this stuff we've been doing has been pretty good distance from shore, kind of focusing on main lake stuff, but, like Ottertail Lake's 15,000 acres, but at least from what I've found, I've got like 10 acres that are holding fish up real shallow like this. So it's not a widespread pattern. It's localized. But boy, when you find it, there ain't nobody else touching them.
Not until they watch this show anyway. But
hopefully the bite will be over then.
Yeah. So how did you find him? I mean, especially if you're bringing clients out there, what are clients saying when you said, yeah, we're going to fish walleyes? I know it's 90 degrees, hot and sunny, and it's about lunchtime. But that spot out there where it's 2 feet? Yeah, we're going to go there to try to find some walleyes. I mean, what are the clients saying about this?
A lot of them. So I've went both ways. I tell some of them what we're doing before we get there. And then other guys I've just been pulling up, giving them the rod, explaining what we're going to do, but not what depth we've been in, and they'll cast out, and they're like, well, what are we in, a foot of water here? I'm like, close, we're in 2.5 to 4.
Crazy.
But yeah, they all kind of the same mindset you had there. Just everybody, they can't picture walleyes being up that shallow in the middle of the day, and especially now when the water's 80, 90 degrees. So not 90, but we're pushing that 80 mark. So
you are finding 80 degrees.
It's hard to believe they're up there, but they are.
How did you find them up there?
By accident. Completely honest. Yep, completely by accident. But I think that's how a lot of guys find these spots. You fall off of your trolling path and end up running into a pot of fish somewhere weird. That's I think it's just the way a lot of guys find fish. But we were fishing like 8 to 10 foot, and we had caught a fish and drifted way up shallow. And I went to get us out of there, looking over the side of the boat, and I could see walleye swimming. So we just changed our approach up. And
So you were just seeing, just with your eyes in the water, you were just seeing them swimming under the boat?
yeah, we had drifted up shallower into that 2-3 foot, and I had looked over the side of the boat to make sure there's no big rocks actually, and I seen a couple walleyes swim out. So well, we'll pull up here and give it a shot.
Unreal. Isn't it funny how even with all the electronics in the world that you can have, all the gizmos and gadgets, sometimes it's just about being there and, just seeing it with your own two eyes going, that's where the fish are today.
Yeah, my favorite part about guiding is just that big puzzle, and you have to figure it out every single day. You got a few pieces of it that you get to put together, but you 100-piece puzzle, you're missing 95 pieces of it. You got to figure that out in the lake as the day goes on. So that's a cool part about it.
I had somebody talk to me the other day about our muskie episode on Beers Lake and Maplewood State Park there. And, it was such a fun show to do. We had a great day of fishing out there. It was a beautiful fall day on the lake. Great time to target muskies, of course, in that cooler temperature, the fall time like that. Right now is probably not a great time to be out there for muskies, is it?
The fish will bite. They're chasing hard. They got to eat a lot this time of year. It's tempting, but that water is just a little too hot for those fish. You're going to stress them too bad. You see a lot of delayed mortality in the summertime. You even see it with walleyes. I'm seeing it right now with like eel pout and tullabies and suckers and stuff. They're starting to float because the water's getting too hot. Yeah, there's no need, nobody eats muskies, nobody's keeping them. There's not a need right now to put that extra stress on the fish. It's a limited resource the way it is. Just give it a little while. Come August, our nights will start cooling off, and we'll get those temperatures back down a little bit.
Is there a temperature that that you say, okay, now that's a safe temperature for us to be targeting muskies out here?
Anything under 76 is better. When I start seeing that 76 and a half, 77 and higher, I don't like being out there. It's just these fish are, this time of year, those fish can come from 30 foot to hit a bait that's 2 foot down. And it's a lot of stress on these fish when they got to fight and get in the net and handling them and everything. So I'd say anything from 76 and lower, you're okay to do it. Just be very cautious and careful if you do it after that temperature.
I understand the want to go fishing in the summertime like this, and sometimes you can cool off when you're out on a lake, and some fishing is fine when it's this temperature, depending on what you're doing and what you're targeting. But man, we filmed another show for Prairie Sportsman last year. We were on Grindstone Lake trying to catch lake trout real deep, and then also trying to catch bass in the shallows, whatever. Talking about the 2-story lake that Grindstone is, and it was so hot that day. I don't remember the exact temp, but it must have been mid-90s, probably, something like that. And at one point, we all jumped in the lake to cool off, Randin. We didn't cool off. Like, the water temperature was that hot that it was almost as warm as the air temperature out there. And that's when we kind of were like, all right, I think we've had enough of this fishing business. It's too hot to be out here no matter what.
I think that's something to think about just with all fish,
Yeah.
Walleyes can get delayed mortality this time of year, pike, sunfish, crappies, all that stuff can. So, if you're going to go out fishing, go fishing. You should go fishing whenever you can, but just be a little mindful. If you're going to take fish home, get your 6 and, be mindful where you're catching those fish at too. So bringing them up from a lot of deep water, that a lot of times those fish will come back up or sink back to the bottom after a while. So.
Yeah. Well, historically you thought you had to go deep to catch walleyes. Maybe that's not the case, as if you're finding them in 2 feet of water right now in the middle of the day on a hot, calm, sunny day in Otter Tail Lakes country up there, Randin. If people want to jump in a boat with you and have you take them out for a guided day of fishing, what should they do?
The best thing to do is just give me a call at 218-640-0158. You can find me on Facebook at Lockjaw Guide Service or the website there at www.lockjawfishing.com.
Lockjawfishing.com, and to find more about Ottertail Lakes Country, go to ottertaillakescountry.com. Randin Olson, thanks for the time today on the show.
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me. I challenge you guys to go up real shallow for walleyes. You'll be pleasantly surprised.
All right, we're going to do that.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Ottertail County?
Yep, and I'm gonna fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Ottertail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Ottertail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter. Go to this site right here.
Coming to us from the airport, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Joe Henry. Joe, how you doing?
How you doing, guys? Good.
Very good. Thanks for. I know the airports are crazy, and the last thing you want to do when you're in an airport is go on the radio. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that here today. Where are you flying back from, Joe?
You know what? I was out on Lake Erie fishing a tournament. I used to live in Cleveland, and I got my captain's license out here in Lake Erie. And through that, living out here for 4 years, I got to meet a lot of really good guys and charter captains in the fishing industry, and we became friends, of course. And it's my one chance per year to come out and hang out with some friends that are very close to me, and also fish a real neat fishing tournament out on Lake Erie.
And you actually did pretty well out there. It sounds like you guys won that tournament, Joe?
We did. There's typically 30 charter boats to this tournament with 5 anglers per charter boat, and it's casting only. And normally it's Canadian waters only, but with the border being closed, we had to fish Ohio waters this year. And we did good. We found some fish, and there are so many walleyes in Lake Erie. And we talk about. It's funny because people from Lake Erie will give me a hard time about our slogan for Lake of the Woods being the walleye capital of the world, and I have to explain to them that they're both very, very good walleye fisheries. There's pros and cons to each. There are differences, but Lake Erie obviously is one of them. If you've seen some of the walleye fishing industry, and a lot of fish, a lot of good times, and just very blessed to be able to come out here and do this.
You said something there. I know we've talked about this on the show in the past, but I just want to touch on it again because when you think about it for walleye fishing, you don't really think of casting, although we've talked to many people recently about casting into shallow water to catch walleyes. So I think it is definitely a technique that gets used here in Minnesota. But when you're talking about a great lake and fishing for walleyes, and you're talking about casting only, explain how that works, Joe.
On Lake of the Woods, you don't have to cast as much because the water is stained. And, those walleyes aren't nearly as spooked by the – you can fish right under the boat and catch walleyes, for the most part. And, Lake Erie, they have thermals as a different fishery. The water is very clear. And consequently, when the boat goes over these fish, a lot of times those fish will, skedaddle and get from the – people have to catch them. And primarily what we were using is what's called a weapon. So what a weapon is a snelled spinner about 2 feet long with an egg sink. And the sinker might be anywhere from 3/4 ounce to an ounce and a half, depending upon how deep you're fishing and how windy it is. And basically what you do is you cast that away from the boat, let it get down to the depth where the walleyes are. It could be right below the surface or it could be the bottom, depending on the day. And then you just work it back to the boat. And there's certainly some important nuances to get these fish to bite. But overall, that's a technique they use out on charter boats on Lake Erie if you're going to be casting. And it works great. We got a lot of walleyes.
Well, Joe, I know you've been out fishing and you've been on the road a little bit, so maybe you haven't been able to watch the news as much as we've had. I'm going to bring Dan on here for just a second so he can explain this to you, so we can try to make sense of what's going on, because we're all excited about the border opening up here on August 9th for the Northwest Angle or for anybody making plans to go up into Canada. But Dan, you sent me a story about potentially a strike in Canada. Is that right?
Yeah, we're all excited for the border, and every bit of news we see about it, I have to click on. And the Canadian Border Patrol's picking a very inopportune time for us to go on strike. It sounds like August 6th, they're going to choose to go on strike for a number of reasons. It doesn't really have much to do with the border opening. I think that's just their timing of it. But from what I've read and understood,
hang on just a second. Let me make it
I
clear that this has everything to do with the border opening. This is what you call leverage, is what it is, because they know that they're in a position right now that they're going to win this because of how jam-packed those border crossings are going to be on August 9th. They threatened to go on strike right before that. That's a brilliant move on their part. It's just frustrating for the rest of us.
Right. Yeah, I guess when I say it doesn't have anything to do with the border, their strike isn't because the border's opening, It's it has to do with their contracts. They haven't had a contract for 3 years, it sounds like. Some people have been calling the workplace toxic. They're wanting some help. They've been having to work through the pandemic, much like most people have. They want some compensation for that. And so they're picking this time. It's going to be a great time to go on strike. Now, also from what I've read, it doesn't sound like this is going to delay the border opening. Doesn't sound like we're not, people are still going to be able to cross. It's just lines are going to be long. It's going to slow things way down, which is going to suck. It's going to be frustrating. But yeah, it's a brilliant move on their part. So I guess more power to them. Sucks for us though.
Well, I'll tell you what, I did some traveling fairly recently, and airports have been short-staffed as it is, just like every other job in the country right now. Nobody is working. Airports are no different. And I had some connecting flights that I was real worried about missing. And I had some other people I was in lines with that they're really worried about missing connecting flights. So if you've got travel plans, you may want to make sure that if you've got connecting flights, you want to make sure that you're not planning on having a meal between some of those connecting flights if you have a short layover. Because I had, an hour and a half layover on a couple of spots, and there was zero layover for me. Like, it was rushing. People were literally sprinting through the airports. And there were, some of the customs desks were all empty. They had very few people working at them. So we'll see how it goes. And Joe, so hopefully that doesn't mean any real change for getting up to the angle, obviously, because you just have that one area to go through. And will that be, because that became some sort of an automated crossing, right? You could just use a phone to go through there. Do you think that's the way it'll be?
Well, I'll tell you, we have some questions. So, we do know that the border is opening August 9th. Of course, you got to have your COVID pass. You got to download the ArriveCan app, upload your COVID, vaccination card, and then what you need to do is have a negative COVID test, a PCR test. Okay, those are fine. But the other questions we have are, okay, so you travel into Canada, the Northwest Angle. Well, then you're going to travel home from the Northwest Angle, and the 72-hour window has expired for your negative COVID test. What are you going to do when it comes to getting another COVID test? Are you able to travel into Ontario or Canadian waters and fish if you're up at the Northwest Angle, or do you need to remain in Minnesota? We have some unanswered questions, and we're working with legislators, and trying to get those questions answered. So far, we have not had them answered. The only thing we did get clarified is that when they asked for a government-issued COVID vaccination card, they use the term government because everything comes from the government out there, but that'll be from your health care provider. So we do have that verified.
Well, there's never a dull moment, obviously. As we've been saying, as much as nothing has changed in the last year and a half, I feel like everything's constantly changing, or nothing is ever quite as it seems, and it's just constantly evolving. So we'll see how it goes and play it by ear. It's the only thing you can really do. How has travel been for you? You're just traveling domestically, of course, here in the United States. How has that been for you?
For me, no problem. Just jumping on a flight at the Minneapolis and Cleveland airports, and so far the lines have been short, and you jump right on, so no problem.
Well, I'll tell you what, when I flew, there were definitely a couple nervous flyers that were traveling for the first time since the pandemic began, so you could tell that they were definitely, and you had to have masks, of course, and all that, and try to socially distance, although it's hard to do that when you're sitting next to somebody on a plane, of course. But there were definitely a couple people that did not want to be in the position that they were in, but as far as I know, everything went fine and went smooth for mine, other than having to rush through a couple of airports.
It is what it is. It's sign of the times, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Joe. Well, we'll let you get back to the airport there. And if people want to make a trip to Lake of the Woods this year, or plan a trip, whether this summer yet, or maybe start thinking about ice fishing a little bit, what should they do?
Everything you need is on our website, and that is mn.com.
Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.